Hi guys, it's Andrew again from the South Allegheny Recording Studio. Today we're talking about adding effects to your tracks. Fair warning, this video will be a little longer than the others on this channel, just because adding effects can be a real rabbit hole with a lot of detail. I'll put some timestamps in the video and in the description below so you can skip ahead to what you're looking for if you want. I'm going to take you through some basic concepts regarding effects and how to add them to your tracks. It's important to mention that while some effects are used more than others, getting the right sound will take a lot of experimentation. Your drum track in this project may need totally different effects than the drum track in your next project. So make sure you use your ears. See what sounds best from track to track. For the sake of being practical, I'm going to talk about the three need-to-know effects: EQ, compression, and reverb. These three are used in almost every recording and can make a big difference in the sound of your final product. Let's get started with EQ. Most people have heard of EQ. You can adjust it for music on your phone or on your stereo system. When you use the EQ or equalizer on your phone or stereo system, you usually have three different options: high, mid, and low. These knobs control the high frequencies, the middle frequencies, and the low frequencies respectively of the entire song that you're listening to. When we're recording, we have a lot more control over the volume of very specific frequencies. This lets us make sure that the frequencies of one particular instrument aren't getting in the way of the frequencies of another. Okay, so I'm here in Logic Pro. Right now I'm working on my full cover of Everlong that I did here in the studio. And for the purposes of this video, I'm going to work on the vocal tracks only. To add an EQ to an instrument, you'll need to make sure that you have the mix window open. In the studio, it should always be open on the left monitor. If it's not there, you can open it again by pressing Command and the number 2 on the Mac keyboard. So here are my vocal channel strips, and I'm going to start with vocals 1 right here. Now, I already have some pitch correction and some pitch shift just to make it sound a little bit more clean. Now, since I want to work on the vocals track by itself, I'm going to click this S button at the bottom of the channel strip. The S button stands for solo. When selected, it mutes the rest of the instruments and only plays the track that you've soloed. So instead of the full band, I'm just going to hear the vocals now. To add an EQ or any audio effects, I'm going to go to the audio effects section here. If I click in a blank space, I have all these different options, and I'm going to come down to EQ, channel EQ, and mono. Then the EQ window pops up. Here we can adjust the volume of different frequencies in several different spots, also known as bands. If I drag the handle up, the frequency gets louder, and if I drag it down, it gets softer. Across the top, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different bands I can choose. Because I have so many bands, I can shape the sound however I want. I could cut out the low end here. I could cut out the high end. I'll boost it right here. I'll cut it right there. I can shape the sound exactly how I need to based on the frequency level. Because I have my track soloed, I'll have an easier time hearing the little intricacies of a sound as compared to when the rest of the band is playing. The frequency spectrum goes from left to right, with the leftmost frequencies being the lowest frequencies and the rightmost being the highest. For example, I can cut everything below 40 Hertz or so by moving this band here. I might do this because really low frequencies can make things sound too rumbly or too boomy. I could also boost around 1 kilohertz to bring out the best quality in a female vocal track or a guitar track. Or I could add a shelf at 10 kilohertz to give my cymbals a little bit more shimmer. These are just examples though. Each mix may require different adjustments. So I've got my vocal track soloed. When I play the track, you can see the signal analyzer here at the bottom. This analyzer is telling me where the most important frequencies are for the track that's playing. So for example, this vocal part doesn't have too much below the 250-ish Hertz range. So what I might do is I'll bring the low band on, and I might drag it over about this far because there's nothing down here anyway, so I might as well not have any frequencies in this part. Doing so will cut out the bass frequencies and make the vocal part less boomy. There are no set rules for this, so you'll need to experiment to see what works best. This may seem overwhelming at first, especially because it can take a while to hear specific frequencies. Thankfully for us though, Logic Pro has a ton of great presets for EQ to get you started. If I click on this drop-down menu, I'll see a bunch of instrument choices at the bottom. When I go into the next menu, there's some descriptions of different EQ sounds you may want for your track. So for example, I might want clear vocals. See how it automatically adjusts the EQ for me? Let's listen to it and see how it sounds. If it's tough to tell, I'll play it without and then I'll turn it on. Here's without. If anything could ever feel this good again. And with. If anything could ever feel this good again. So maybe kind of subtle, but it's removing a lot of low frequencies, making some space for the other instruments. And it's also giving me a boost on the top end to give it a little bit more shimmer. That sounds pretty good. Once I have my vocal EQ in place, I'll go through the rest of my tracks and adjust the EQ to make sure it sounds the best against the other instruments. A few quick tips about EQ. Number one, use your ears. Even though a preset says clean vocals, you still need to listen to make sure it sounds good to you. Number two, listen in context. Once you get an EQ sounding good, make sure you listen to it with the rest of your tracks on. You may find that your EQ on the guitar sounds good now, but once the drums come in, something gets lost in translation. Number three, take breaks. When you mix for a long period of time, you can experience ear fatigue, where you can't accurately discern what adjustments you need to make. Make sure to take short breaks. Okay guys, that was a very brief overview of EQ, and there's a wealth of information on YouTube about different techniques for EQing. Next, I'm going to go over compression and how it can help your performance be consistent. Okay, let's talk about compression. Compression is a very useful tool to make your track sound more present and consistent. So what is compression? Well, if something is compressed in the real world by definition, usually it's being squeezed. It's the same way with your audio tracks. Here, I have one of my audio tracks, and you can see the waveforms. Some are bigger, some are smaller. While that's fine in itself, in the context of a performance, it's very inconsistent. To get the best possible sound, we need as consistent of a performance as possible. A compressor will squeeze the big waveforms down so they're closer in volume to the smaller ones. Then, it will increase the volume for everything. In effect, it brings the quiet sounds up and the loud sounds down, providing a very consistent performance. This allows me to turn everything up without it distorting or sounding choppy. So just like we added our EQ, I'll come over to the audio effects section here. I'll click on a blank spot, and instead I'm going to come down to Dynamics, Compressor, and then Mono. Now this is the main compressor that comes with Logic. All compressors have three main controls. First is the threshold here. The threshold is the volume level where the compressor will start to kick in. So if I have it set to -30 dB, if it detects a sound at -30 dB, the compressor will activate. Next we have ratio. The ratio determines how hard the compressor will squeeze the track. In general, you'll be in the 2:1 to 5:1 range. However, if you're working on vocals like I am now, you may want to go higher to get a really modern pop sound, maybe 10 to 12:1. The third control is makeup gain. When I compress the larger waveforms, I'm turning them down, so it'll begin to sound quieter. The makeup gain compensates by bringing the entire compressed sound up in volume. Okay, so I've applied compression to my vocal track. I set the threshold to -29.5 dB. That seemed like a good place for the vocal to come in and start to be compressed. I'm looking for a really modern pop sound, so I turned the ratio way up to 12:1. And because it's being squeezed so much, I'm going to say you're going to turn the whole thing up by 2 dB. The only other thing of note is this distortion knob. I added the soft distortion to give my vocals a little bit more oomph. So let's listen to the track. First, I'll play it without compression, and then I'll turn it on so we can hear the difference. Let's listen. Here it is without.
If anything could ever feel this good again.
And now with it on.
If anything could ever feel this good again.
Do you hear the difference? The vocal's more present and in your face because I've squeezed the waveforms to make it overall consistent and louder. Just like our EQ, there are a ton of presets to help you get started. When I click the drop-down menu, just like our EQ, I have options for voice, for example, and I could choose something like studio vocal, vocal second, etc. Remember, the presets are often a good starting point, but make sure you use your ears and adjust the controls as you need, because each mix will be different. Now let's talk about reverb. Have you ever been in the gym and noticed that your voice echoes more than when you're talking to someone in the hallway? Because the gym is so large and there are so many hard surfaces, the sound waves bounce all around the room and come back to your ears. This creates a reverb effect. You might experience this in a big church, at a stadium, or any other large room. It's important to know that even though it's easy to hear reverb in a gym or other large room, reverb exists in every room, big or small. In recording, we simulate that reverb to make it sound like all of our instruments are in the same room playing together. I say it like that because, especially in this day and age, musicians aren't usually going into pro studios with a large room and recording all together at the same time. Most of the time, people make music in their homes without great reverb rooms. So, Logic has reverb effects that you can add to your tracks. For our purposes, reverb acts as the glue to make instruments blend together nicely. Also, I can use reverb to push something further back in the mix if I don't want it to be directly in my face. Just like how we added our EQ and our compressor, I'm going to go into the audio effects section, click in the blank spot. I'm going to go all the way down to reverb. I like chromaverb, and I'll hit mono. Now in here, there's a lot of knobs across the bottom, but I want to direct your attention to some key controls. First is the decay knob right here. The decay knob adjusts how long the reverb lasts on your particular track. A general rule of thumb, keep decay times shorter than you would think. It may sound really cool to add a long reverb on your guitar track, but in the mix with other instruments, it'll eventually get really muddy and sound unclear. Second, the dry and wet controls. The dry control sets how much of the original signal without reverb is coming through, and the wet signal controls the amount of reverb applied to the signal. In effect, you can turn up the wet control to increase the amount of reverb. Let's first listen to the track without reverb, and then I'll play it again with reverb on so you can hear the difference. So here's without.
If anything could ever feel this good again.
And with.
If anything could ever feel this good again.
There's a pretty big difference there. For reverb, presets can be your best friend. Here in the presets, instead of having instruments to choose from, I have the different types of rooms to choose from. You can pick the one that resembles the room you'd like it to emulate. I'll pick Studio 1. Now I can adjust the dry and wet knobs to taste.
If anything could ever feel this good again. Only thing I'll ever ask of you.
In general, I like to have the wet knobs set to 25% or lower. In context with the other instruments, if it's any higher than that, things can sound really muddy and boomy. Okay, I've made EQ, compression, and reverb adjustments to all of my vocal tracks. First, I'm going to play it without any effects on it, just so you can see what it sounded like before, and then I'll turn them all on so you can hear the difference. First, without.
If anything could ever feel this good again. The only thing I'll ever ask of you.
And with.
If anything could ever feel this good again.
Pretty big difference. There are a ton of other effects you can add to your tracks. Those include delay, noise gate, pitch correction, envelope filters, choruses, flangers, and many more. You can add them all from the same menu we've added the other effects here. There are also plenty of great resources on YouTube that will explain each of these effects in more detail. The combination of volume, panning, and effects can give your recording a big boost in quality. However, remember to use your ears. Overdoing it can cause more problems and make things sound worse. In general, you're looking for a good balance between all the instruments. Okay guys, thanks for watching. That was an extremely fast explanation of adding effects and the uses for EQ, compression, and reverb in your mixes. In the next video of my mixing series, I'm going to break down the entire production of my cover of Everlong here in the studio, from the pitch correction to the EQ, compression, reverb, and any other small changes that made the final product what it is. Check out the South Allegheny Recording Studio website for more videos, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.